What happens when you experience a miracle when you need it most? For one young boy, a simple visit to his mother's grave set off a chain of events that would transform his world. As Tommy placed the flowers on his mother's grave, he wished for a sign that she was still with him. Little did he know, his life was about to change in ways he never imagined. Before we continue this amazing story, please consider liking our video and subscribing to our channel to hear more stories like this. We appreciate your support. Thank you. Now, back to where we left off. At just 10 years old, Tommy had lost the center of his world. His mother's passing left a void that seemed impossible to fill. Each day felt like a struggle, and the once cheerful boy now walked with slumped shoulders, his eyes often red from crying. It had been a month since the funeral, and Tommy finally gathered the courage to visit her grave alone. As he stood there, surrounded by the quiet of the cemetery, he felt a mix of sadness and longing. He traced his fingers over the engraved letters of her name, wishing he could hear her voice one last time. With a heavy heart, Tommy whispered, "I miss you, Mom. I don't know how to go on without you." As Tommy's words faded into the stillness of the cemetery, a gentle breeze rustled through the nearby trees. The sound stirred something within him, a memory of his mother's comforting touch when he was scared. He closed his eyes, trying to hold on to that feeling for just a moment longer. The walk to the cemetery had been difficult. Each step felt heavier than the last, and Tommy found himself pausing several times along the way. He clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked from their backyard, his mother's favorite. The familiar scent of the blooms brought both comfort and a fresh wave of grief. Standing before the headstone, Tommy's mind raced with memories. He remembered the way his mother's eyes crinkled when she laughed, how she always knew just what to say when he was upset, and the smell of her perfume when she hugged him goodbye each morning before school. Now, those memories felt like a bittersweet ache in his chest. "Mom," Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I really need you right now." He placed the wildflowers gently at the base of the headstone, arranging them carefully as tears began to blur his vision. "Dad's trying his best, but it's not the same without you. I feel so alone." As he spoke, Tommy noticed a small ladybug crawling along one of the flower petals. He watched it, momentarily distracted from his grief. His mother had always said ladybugs were good luck. Tommy couldn't help but wonder if this tiny visitor was more than just a coincidence. The ladybug's presence seemed to lighten the heaviness in Tommy's heart, if only for a moment. He found himself talking more freely, sharing stories and memories with his mother as if she were sitting right beside him. He told her about school, his friends, and how much he missed her pancakes on Sunday mornings. Time seemed to stand still in the quiet of the cemetery. Tommy lost track of how long he had been there, pouring out his heart to the silent stone that bore his mother's name. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the graves, he realized it was time to head home. With a deep breath, Tommy stood up, brushing grass from his jeans. He took one last look at the headstone, his eyes lingering on the ladybug that had now made its way to the top. "I'll come back soon, Mom," he promised softly. "I love you." As he turned to leave, Tommy noticed something glinting in the grass near his feet. Curious, he bent down to investigate. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the object, a small silver locket that had belonged to his mother. He had thought it was lost forever when they couldn't find it among her belongings after she passed. With trembling hands, Tommy picked up the locket, feeling its familiar weight and shape. He carefully opened it, revealing the tiny photo of himself as a baby, nestled safely inside. Tears welled up in his eyes once more, but this time they were accompanied by a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. As Tommy clutched the locket tightly in his hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, in some way, his mother was still watching over him. The unexpected discovery of the locket felt like a small miracle, a tangible reminder of his mother's enduring love. As Tommy turned to leave the cemetery, a gust of wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of lilacs. He paused, his heart skipping a beat. Lilacs were his mother's favorite flower, and their blooming season had long since passed. Confused, he looked around, searching for the source of the fragrance. sweet aroma grew stronger, enveloping him like a warm embrace. Tommy closed his eyes, memories of his mother tending to her beloved lilac bushes flooding his mind. For a moment, he could almost feel her presence beside him, as real and comforting as it had always been. When he opened his eyes, Tommy gasped. There, at the foot of his mother's gravestone, stood a small lilac bush in full bloom. Its delicate purple flowers swayed gently in the breeze, their perfume filling the air. Tommy blinked hard, certain he must be dreaming. He had visited this spot just days ago, and there had been nothing but grass and wilting flowers left by mourners. Hesitantly, he approached the bush, reaching out to touch one of the soft petals. It felt real beneath his fingertips, cool and velvety. Tommy's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. How could a fully grown lilac bush appear out of nowhere? As he stood there, torn between disbelief and wonder, a memory surfaced. His mother had once told him a story about her grandmother's funeral. She had spoken of a mysterious rosebush that had appeared on the grave overnight, bearing her grandmother's favorite flowers. At the time, Tommy had dismissed it as just another fairy tale. Now, he wasn't so sure. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Is this you?" The wind picked up again, sending a shower of lilac petals swirling around him. Tommy felt a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since before his mother's illness. It was as if she was answering him, wrapping him in her love. For the first time in weeks, a small smile tugged at the corners of Tommy's mouth. He plucked a single blossom from the bush, tucking it carefully into his pocket. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery, Tommy reluctantly prepared to leave. He took one last look at the lilac bush, still blooming impossibly in the fading light. "I'll come back soon, Mom," he promised softly. Walking home, Tommy clutched the locket tightly in one hand, the scent of lilac still clinging to his clothes. He couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had just happened. His mind whirled with questions, but his heart felt lighter than it had in months. He couldn't explain what had happened at the grave, but he knew one thing for certain. He no longer felt alone. That night, as Tommy drifted off to sleep, the gentle fragrance of lilacs filled his room. In his dreams, he saw his mother's smiling face, heard her laughter, and felt the warmth of her embrace. For the first time since her passing, Tommy slept peacefully through the night, the silver locket resting safely on his bedside table. The miraculous appearance of the lilac bush and the discovery of his mother's necklace were just the beginning of a series of unexplained events that would change his life forever. The next morning, Tommy woke to the sweet aroma of pancakes wafting through the house. For a moment, he thought his mother was in the kitchen making his favorite breakfast. His heart sank as reality set in, but curiosity pulled him out of bed. In the kitchen, he found his father standing over the stove, a stack of perfectly golden pancakes on a plate beside him. "Dad?" Tommy asked, his voice a mix of confusion and hope. "You never make pancakes." His father turned, a sad smile on his face. "I know, buddy. I woke up this morning, and it was like I could hear your mom telling me how to make them. I thought you might like it." As they sat down to eat, Tommy noticed his father's eyes widen in surprise. "These taste just like your mother's," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Over the next few weeks, more inexplicable occurrences began to unfold. Tommy's math teacher, Mrs. Anderson, pulled him aside after class one day. "Tommy," she said gently, "I know you've been struggling lately, but I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with your latest test. It's like your mother was guiding your hand." Tommy stared at the paper, recognizing his mother's favorite method for solving complex problems, a method she had tried to teach him countless times. At the local park, where Tommy often sat alone on the swings, a kind elderly woman named Rose began to visit him. She'd bring homemade cookies that tasted eerily similar to his mother's recipe. "You remind me of my grandson," she'd say, her eyes twinkling. "He lives far away, but somehow I felt drawn to come here and keep you company." Even Tommy's best friend, Jack, noticed the change. "You seem different," he said one afternoon as they kicked a soccer ball around. "It's like you've got this I don't know, this glow about you. Like you're not as sad anymore. And it's from Tommy paused, the ball at his feet. He thought about the locket, the pancakes, the math test, and Rose's cookies. A warm feeling spread through his chest, and he realized Jack was right. The constant ache of loss was still there, but it was softened now by something else. A sense of comfort and connection he couldn't quite explain. That night, as Tommy got ready for bed, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. His eyes, once dull with grief, now held a spark of hope. He touched the locket around his neck and whispered, "Thanks, Mom. I think I'm gonna be okay." As he drifted off to sleep, Tommy couldn't help but wonder what other miracles might be waiting for him. For the first time since losing his mother, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow. As Tommy continued to visit his mother's grave, something unexpected began to happen. The overwhelming sadness that had consumed him started to give way to a different feeling, one of comfort and connection. He found himself looking forward to these quiet moments where he could talk to his mom and feel her presence in the gentle breeze or the warm sunlight. One afternoon, as Tommy sat by the headstone, he noticed a small blue butterfly landing on a nearby flower. Its delicate wings reminded him of the color of his mother's favorite dress. As he watched it flutter, a memory surfaced of his mom telling him that butterflies were messengers of love from those who had passed on. For the first time since her death, Tommy felt a spark of hope ignite within him. From that day forward, Tommy began to see signs of his mother everywhere. The scent of her perfume would waft through the air as he walked to school. He'd find heart-shaped rocks on the sidewalk, just like the ones they used to collect together. Even the clouds seemed to form shapes that reminded him of her smile. At first, Tommy kept these experiences to himself, afraid others might think he was imagining things. But as the days passed, he couldn't help but share his feelings with his dad. To his surprise, his father listened with tears in his eyes and shared his own mysterious encounters, like hearing his wife's favorite song on the radio at just the right moment or finding her handwritten notes in unexpected places. Another one of Tommy's teachers, Mrs. Johnson, noticed a change in him too. His drawings in art class, once dark and somber, now burst with color and life. When she asked about it, Tommy hesitantly explained how he felt his mom was still with him. Instead of dismissing his beliefs, Mrs. Johnson shared a story about losing her own father and feeling his presence in the years that followed. As Tommy opened up about his experiences, he found that many people had similar stories to share. His best friend, Jake, confessed that he sometimes felt his grandfather's presence when he played baseball. Even grumpy old Mr. Peterson from next door softened when Tommy mentioned feeling his mom nearby, revealing that he often sensed his late wife in their garden. These connections formed a web of support around Tommy, each person offering a different perspective on grief and healing. He began to see that while the pain of losing his mother would never completely disappear, it could coexist with joy and hope. One evening, as Tommy and his dad looked through old photo albums, they came across a picture of his mom at the beach, her arms outstretched as if embracing the ocean. Tommy suddenly remembered something she once told him. "Love is like the ocean, Tommy. Even when you can't see it, it's always there, surrounding you." In that moment, Tommy realized that all the signs and coincidences he'd been experiencing were more than just random events. They were reminders of the endless love his mother had for him, a love that continued even after she was gone. This understanding brought a new sense of peace to Tommy's heart, allowing him to move forward while keeping his mom's memory alive. As he closed the photo album, Tommy felt a warmth spread through his chest. He looked at his dad and saw a mix of sadness and pride in his eyes. "Mom's still taking care of us, isn't she?" Tommy asked softly. His father nodded, pulling him into a tight hug. "She always will be, buddy," he whispered. "She always will be." As Tommy stood there, his words hanging in the air, something extraordinary happened. A warm breeze suddenly swept through the cemetery, carrying with it the faint scent of his mother's favorite perfume. Tommy's heart raced as he looked around, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then he saw it. A shimmering figure began to take shape near his mother's grave. At first, Tommy thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but as the image became clearer, he gasped. It was his mom, looking just as she had before her illness took hold. "Mom," Tommy whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. The figure smiled, and Tommy felt a wave of love and comfort wash over him. Though no words were spoken, he could hear his mother's voice in his mind, clear as day. She told him how proud she was of him, how much she loved him, and that she would always be watching over him. Tears streamed down Tommy's face as he listened to her message. She spoke of the signs she'd been sending: the lilac bush, the locket, the pancakes his father made. Each was a reminder of her enduring love and presence in his life. As Tommy absorbed these revelations, his mother's form began to fade. Panic gripped him, and he reached out, not wanting to lose her again. But her voice in his mind soothed him, reminding him that she was never truly gone. Before she disappeared completely, she shared one last message. She told Tommy about a hidden box in the attic, containing letters she had written for him to read as he grew older. These letters, she explained, would guide him through important moments in his life, allowing her to be there for him even in her absence. As the shimmering figure vanished, Tommy felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The weight of grief that had been crushing him for months seemed to lift. He realized that while his mother was no longer physically present, her love and guidance would always be a part of his life. With newfound determination, Tommy left the cemetery and rushed home. He climbed into the attic, his heart pounding as he searched for the box his mother had described. When he finally found it, tucked away behind old trunks and boxes, his hands shook as he opened it. Inside, he found dozens of sealed envelopes, each labeled with a specific occasion or age. "For your first day of high school," read one. "When you fall in love for the first time," said another. Tommy's eyes welled up with tears as he realized the depth of his mother's love and foresight. This discovery marked a turning point in Tommy's life. The letters became a source of comfort and guidance, helping him navigate the challenges of growing up without his mother physically present. Each time he opened a new letter, he felt connected to her in a way he never thought possible after her passing. As the days turned into weeks and months, Tommy's outlook on life began to change. The sadness that had consumed him gave way to hope and determination. He started to excel in school, inspired by his mother's words of encouragement. He made new friends and rekindled old relationships, sharing his experiences and helping others who were dealing with loss. Tommy's father noticed the change in his son and felt his own heart begin to heal. Together, they found ways to honor Tommy's mother's memory while moving forward with their lives. They started a support group for children who had lost parents, sharing the lessons they had learned about grief and healing. Following one of the sessions, Tommy decided to make a visit to Mother's grave. As he stood there, he realized how much had changed since that first visit. The overwhelming grief that once consumed him had transformed into a bittersweet appreciation for the time they shared. He smiled, remembering the miraculous events that had unfolded over the past year. Tommy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn envelope. It was the last letter from his mother's hidden box, saved for his high school graduation. With trembling hands, he opened it and began to read. Tears welled in his eyes as he absorbed her words of pride and encouragement. "I wish you were here to see this, Mom," Tommy whispered, his voice thick with emotion. As if in response, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the lilac bush that still bloomed beside her headstone. Tommy felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest, a reminder that his mother's love would always be with him. Well, listeners, that is the end of the story. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to our channel and giving this video a like. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope to have you back soon.